Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and tonight we're going to take a look at some local history. For those that are not aware, Discover History was founded in 2003 in the city of Worcester. So whenever we refer to local history, it's referring to the city of Worcester. And the amazing thing about Worcester is we've got thousands and thousands of years of history. If you are interested specifically in Worcester history, if you click on our YouTube channel and go to the playlist, you will be able to see a separate category just on Worcester history. And we've got all sorts in there, including overviews of the history of Worcester at certain times, for example Roman Worcester or Tudor Worcester, for example. So do take a look in there. Obviously, once lockdown finishes, join us on one of our walking tours. And if you want to find out more about our walking tours, just have a look on our website at www.discover-history.co.uk. And if you click onto the bit about walking tours, you will get a complete list of everything that we do. In particular, we offer 36 walking tours. Now, going back to the theme tonight on local history, when we look at the history of Worcester, it is, as with most cities and towns, often dominated by men. So if you wander around Worcester, for example, you will find a statue of Sir Edward Algar. If you go into Worcester Guildhall, you will see lots of different mayors of Worcester, and majority of them have been men over the years. However, there are a lot of famous women from Worcester, and what we're going to do with this short video tonight is show you some of the famous women of Worcester. And what I want you to do is comment on here, or when it goes onto Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, you can also comment on there and let us know which Worcester woman or woman associated with Worcester you would like to learn a little bit more about. So all we're going to do this evening is show you some of them, and remember, they're not all from Worcester, but they have connections with Worcester. And what I want you to do is let us know which one you'd like to learn a little bit more about. Also, if you had a look in our walking tours of Worcester, you will actually find a city tour looking just at women of Worcester. And it's an interesting one because we take you to places associated with the women that I'm going to be talking about in this shortened video for this evening. So the first person that we are going to show you is this one, and hopefully you can see it in the camera. The problem I always worry about on a camera is the fact that because we use these pictures when we do our walking tours, they're always laminated, and obviously sometimes if you get the wrong angle of the light you may not actually see it. We also use these when we do talks on women of Worcester. So this one is of a lady that was not from Worcester specifically, but she came to Worcester, and this is Alice Ockley. Now, Alice Ockley is quite an important person for all the women or all the girls in Worcester, purely because when she actually moved to the city in the Victorian period, she noted how the city had a very good education system for boys, and that's typical really. As I said, men and boys often overshadowed women in history. And the interesting thing is, she actually commented saying, for example, there is an Elizabethan school, which is the Royal Grammar School that's located in the Tithing. It's still there today. And she also commented that there was also the King's School in Worcester, which was obviously refounded by Henry VIII. So she actually made this big comment about these brilliant schools teaching boys in Worcester, and she made a comment that it was such a shame that there was no similar education for girls in particular. So she ended up setting up a small school in Worcester, and that school was going right up to relatively recently. And if you want to know where it is, or was I should say, it's located near the grammar school, also in the Tithing. Today, interestingly, the grammar school and this school called Alice Ockley School, as it was when it started, is now joined together. They're actually merged together. So she is quite an important lady for Worcester, because she brought a fine education and grammar school education for girls in Worcester for a long period of time. Alice Ockley was a well-known name within the city of Worcester. The next person I want to draw your attention to is definitely a Worcester woman, and this is the lady called Hannah Snell. Now, most people will probably recognise her picture, and most people will comment and say that's actually a man. The thing is, she led an interesting life. Let me take you briefly, because these are only enthusiasm starters, really. This is a lady that was born in the family home at 25 Friar Street, and that building's still there. And relatively recently, I think only about 2 years ago, I think now, they've actually erected a plaque. The Civic Society put up a plaque to her. So 25 Friar Street, very close to Tudor House, for example. This lady was born, and then sadly, in childbirth, their child died. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but her husband ended up fleeing Worcester by joining the army. She found out, which was secondhand in a way, which is not the best way of finding out, and she decided to dress as a man and join the recruiting sergeant in Worcester, and ended up joining the army basically. And she ended up eventually being transferred into what was known as the Royal Marines, a relatively new force of soldiers, and she became the first female Royal Marine. However, they thought she was a man. She led an interesting life at sea. For example, she was flogged in front of the ship's crew, which would have meant her shirt would have been torn off her back and she would have been given the cat o' nine tails. But amazingly, no one noticed she was a woman and not a man. The other interesting thing is the Battle of Pondicherry. She took a musket ball to the groin, which she took the bullet out herself. So once again, no one knew that she was a woman. But without spoiling it, later in life, when she revealed herself to be a woman, she was thrown out of the army, obviously, and sadly ended up living most of her final days of her life in London as pretty much a drunkard, singing and telling stories about her colourful life, really. So that's Hannah Snell. We've also got another very, very important woman. They're all very important in their own way. And this is the lady Matilda Alice Powell. Now, Matilda Alice Powell was a Worcester woman again, and she was brought up in quite a theatrical family. So her whole family was involved with stage, for example, and from a very young age, they say from about the age of 3.5, 4 years old, she was already playing roles on the stage. For example, she used to play Pocket Sims Reeves, and then later on, as she got older and older, one of the biggest things that she used to do was play, like many people, the sort of sad tramp type of person, that sort of character. And every time she went on stage, instead of going under a name of Matilda Alice Powell, she generally went under a stage name, which was Vesta Tilly. And you've probably heard of this person. She would have been just as important as people like Charlie Chaplin, about the same period, really. The only difference is she stayed with her roots on the stage and didn't go into film and television in America like Charlie Chaplin. But the interesting thing is, as you can see here, she often dressed as a soldier, sometimes with a red tunic and sometimes even a bearskin. Other times she wore, especially during the First World War, khaki, as she is seen in that illustration there. And when the war broke out, the First World War, that is, the Great War, she was often referred to as the greatest recruiting sergeant Britain ever had. And that's really down to the fact that lots and lots of men joined up after some of her bawdy soldier songs, basically. Now, we've got others. We have, for example, a relatively modern person here. And I don't know if anyone recognised this person. This is Sheila Scott. And Sheila Scott was basically a person that went to Alice Ockley School, interestingly. And one day she was given permission to go down as a little visit to Pitchcroft Racecourse, where there was in fact a flying circus. And she went up in a plane, a very modern thing to do this is. And she went up, had a fly over Worcester. When they landed, went back to school, thought nothing of it. But interestingly, after a short period trying to get into acting, she then suddenly had this great idea later in life to go back to aviation. And she ended up winning a vast quantity of firsts, including things, for example, being the first person to fly over the North Pole, for example. Over 100 records, I think it is, in total that she actually amassed. And the picture here was hanging in Worcester Guildhall for some time, and her plane is located in the background there. It's a fantastic painting, I think, because it shows the woman later in life getting an interest in flying, getting a flying license, and she's still quite a relaxed and down to earth person, showing that she's a normal person. She's even got, for example, a cigarette in her hand just there. But sadly, she ended up dying of cancer in 1988. And she is remembered in Worcester, especially if you go to the university, as there is a building dedicated to her. So these are all famous women. And like I said, they're often overshadowed by people like the men of Worcester, Sir Edward Elgar and so on. A couple more that I'll show you briefly. We have Kate Phillips, and you may know this person because she is actually the Kate Phillips that went on board the RMS Titanic in 1912. And this lady ended up eloping with, just trying to think of my name now, Henry Morley. That's the one. It almost went out of my head. Henry Morley. And it's interesting because she is a Worcester woman that is often seen as a person that was escaping the city, really. However, she was looking for a new life. And like I said, we take people to locations around Worcester that are actually linked to these people. And we often go to a shop in Foregate Street, Cafe Mella, I think it is today, and we tell her story just there. So these are Worcester women that have links in the city, mainly because they are from here. Some of them have moved to Worcester, like Alice Ockley, for example, but they all have interesting stories. And like I said, we would like you to tell us which women you would like to learn a little bit more about in our lockdown videos. A couple more very briefly. We have here Mrs. Ellen Wood, who often went under the title Henry Wood. And this is the woman that wrote a vast amount of novels in the city and often based on the city. And if anyone knows the little cafe in Sidbury, that was once her house. This is a copy of the painting that hangs in the Guildhall. And as you can see, she's actually holding on to one of her books there. One of the most famous and popular books set in Worcester was Channing's, and amazingly, we do have actually got a copy of it on our bookshelf. And then we have a famous wife to a mayor, which is Lady Colton. And once again, this family had strong links with theatre. There was a lot of links with theatre years ago, and also the music hall. And what always amazes me is the fact that she was fired out of a cannon by her husband. And the amazing thing about that is I think she is the only wife of a mayor of Worcester, or probably in Britain, to ever be fired out of a cannon. What an amazing story that is. So what we'd like you to do, as I said, is let us know which of those women you'd like to learn a little bit more about. And remember, as soon as lockdown's finished, maybe book on our tour, or if you get a chance, if you're part of a group or organisation, book us for a talk on Worcester women and learn a little bit more about the women that are often overshadowed by the men in history. Anyway, on that note, I hope you've had a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow. Stay in, stay safe, and see you soon. Bye bye.